Print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More clinical failures. Delays contributed to woman's death after pain ordeal. Tasmanian coroner finds. Tasmanian coroner has raised concerns about patient transfers between the state's hospitals after the death of a 53-year-old woman. Trudy Marie Forward died at the Royal Hobart Hospital, RHH, on the 27th of August 2014, from sepsis and multiple organ failure. A week earlier she had undergone urgent vascular surgery after being transferred from the Launceston General Hospital, LGH. Coroner Rod Chandler found there were delays at the LGH in diagnosing Mrs. Forward's condition, a blocked mesenteric artery which restricted blood flow to her intestines. The condition is a medical emergency, with a mortality rate of 60 to 80%. The coroner said survival was enhanced if the condition was quickly diagnosed and treated, ideally within 6 hours, but in Mrs. Forward's case it took 36 hours. In his findings, Mr. Chandler said the records of Ambulance Tasmania showed at 6:27 a.m. on Tuesday the 19th of August 2014 paramedics attended at Mrs. Forward's home. She had complained of severe abdominal pain along with nausea and vomiting and other symptoms coming on around 3 a.m., he said. Mrs. Forward was taken by ambulance to the LGH, arriving at the emergency department at 7:09 a.m. He was seen by a number of clinicians, during which time, Mr. Chandler noted, she had complained to LGH staff, "My tummy is going to explode." The coroner said 5 hours and 33 minutes elapsed between RHH agreeing to the transfer and Mrs. Forward's arrival at 2:18 p.m., with a further 5 hours elapsing before she was seen by a surgeon. Mr. Chandler said the delay was due to a number of factors including an apparent lack of urgency in transporting Mrs. Forward the 198 kilometers to RHH, an apparent lack of urgency in carrying out the surgery and a decision not to operate at the LGH. He said the case also illustrated a patient transfer system functioning below par with concerns over the time taken to call an ambulance then prepare the patient for transfer. Mr. Chandler found the general tone of evidence from several specialists at the LGH was that lengthy transfer times were a relatively common and frustrating experience. He found the delay was caused by the failure by LGH clinicians to identify mesenteric ischemia as a differential diagnosis in the early stages of Mrs. Forward's presentation, the failure to identify an occluded superior mesenteric artery from the CT scan, the unwillingness on the part of vascular surgeon David Starry to involve himself in Mrs. Forward's care and to perform a thrombectomy at the LGH, an apparent lack of urgency in transporting Mrs. Forward to the RHH, such that over 5.5 hours elapsed from the time her transfer was accepted and her arrival at the RHH, an apparent lack of urgency at the RHH in carrying out Mrs. Forward's thrombectomy. Mr. Chandler said a postmortem identified a further thrombus in the superior mesenteric artery, and in light of these matters it cannot be said that Mrs. Forward would have survived. Among his recommendations, Mr. Chandler said the Tasmanian Health Service (THS) should review the circumstances of Mrs. Forward's transfer, which may identify shortcomings in the system and facilitate improvements. Coroner report into death of Trudy Marie Forward. Document pages, notes, text, zoom close, previous for next p. 1 loading p. 2 loading p. 3 loading. Coroner report into death of Trudy Marie Forward. Contents: original document, PDF, related article contributed by ABC News, Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Page note 1 of 16. To print the document, click the original document link to open the original PDF. This time it is not possible to print the document with annotations. Print, email, Facebook, Twitter.